Namaste. The king which you all are aware of by now, was strolling in his palace gardens. He was worried. He was, a little disturbed, preoccupied with the matters of the kingdom, matters of the family, matters of his own health. Now, days together went like this. The king was always lost in his own world, always worrisome, always, not cheerful, let's put it that way. And one day, when the king was strolling through his garden, he noticed his gardener. His gardener had nothing much. He was a poor man who would come every morning, toil in the sun, and go back home in the evening. But his gardener seemed very cheerful, singing away, watering the plants. So the king, being a little confused, seeing what he had seen, began thinking that the gardener has nothing and he is so cheerful. And I have everything: a kingdom, riches, good health, good food, a good roof on my head, a palace. I'm always worried. I'm always preoccupied. I don't seem to, appreciate the joy of life. Now, days went on like this, and one day a monk visited the palace. So the king, after taking blessings from the monk, took the monk's permission and asked the monk if he could narrate what's on his mind. The monk permitted, and the king told him that, look here, the gardener is so happy, he has nothing, and I, having everything, I'm not happy at all. I'm a very unhappy soul. I have everything, but yet I'm always worried, always, disturbed. The monk just smiled and told him, that is because of the burden of your work. Why don't you do one thing? Give up your kingdom to your son, and you see, you'll lead a more cheerful life. The king thought over it and told the monk, my dear friend, my dear sir, my dear monk, I could do it, but my son is only 5 years old. How can he look after a kingdom? That poor boy is yet going to junior school. He doesn't know the ways of life. So the monk smiled and said, okay, don't give it to your son. Give up your kingdom and make me the king. The king again thought over it. What type of proposals are these? And the king said, there's no harm in trying. So the king arranged and gave up his rights, responsibilities, everything, and made the monk the new king of the kingdom. Then, when the monk became the king of the kingdom, the monk asked the old king, the ex king, who is now the ex king, what are you going to do for a living? You don't have a palace now, you don't have money now. The king said, I will do some business. The monk laughed and said, to do business, you need money, capital, and you don't have it. You're no longer the king. The treasury is not in your control. Now the treasury is in my control. The king agreed, thought over it. The ex-king thought over it and said, okay, I will take up employment. I'll go work somewhere. To this, the monk thought and said, since you're willing to work somewhere, why don't you work for me itself? The king readily agreed, feeling that the monk is a nice man, going out of his way to help him take away his so called burdens. So the monk told the king, henceforth, you look after the kingdom and the treasury and everything else on my behalf, since you have the expertise. And I am not used to these big rooms, comfortable beds. I will go back to my hut, and you can report to me time and again in my hut as to how my kingdom is doing. So the king agreed. He took over the responsibilities of the new king and began administering the kingdom. A few months passed by, and the king seemed to be, the new proxy king seemed to be in a very happy mood. He was eating well, sleeping well, smiling away, laughing with his ministers, playing with his children, and everything went on well. This is after a few months, after becoming the proxy king. So, as the time went by, the monk one day came back to court and asked the king, I know the kingdom is doing well. I've heard from the public. You're doing an excellent job. But I have come to ask you, how are you? A few months ago, you were miserable. You were always worried. You were always anxious. You had no appetite. And the king told the monk, the proxy king told the monk, that I'm a very happy man. And the monk smiled and said, You know why? Because the burden of work you took out from your shoulders and gave it to me. You were no longer king. So you never took your job as a burden. But when you are no longer king, you began enjoying what you're an expert in doing. And days went by in this enjoyment. You faced the challenges with a smile. You faced the good times with a smile because you had the experience of what's to be done. Talking of today's life, my dear friends, if you take up your work, your responsibility as a burden, yes, a burden, believe me, I'm sorry to say, you will lead a very, very miserable life. Take it up as something you love. Take it up, something as you're an expert in doing, and you can handle the situation at ease. Do it with a smile. Go to work. Like, look forward for Mondays. I know it sounds very dangerous. Many of you or many of us dread Monday mornings. But if you start looking forward to Monday mornings, believe me, you really love your work. And if you really love your work, you will have an enjoyable week ahead, an enjoyable month ahead, an enjoyable year ahead at your place of work. I hope this conversation is loud and clear. Please do not take work up as a burden, take it up as a joy. You will lead a much more happier and peaceful life. With this, permit me to close today's conversation. Take care, be good. Namaste.